There's a storm brewing. It's not raining. It's not raining yet, but it looks like it's about to be a storm. It's a storm on the way, for real. Right now, I'm reading A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Look, I learned this from my mom. Check this out. Look, this is how I write in my books. Look. I take notes. Look. If I'm reading, I take notes in the book. That's why, I can't ever return a book that I'm reading, because I write in it and take notes in it. This is People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. One of my favorite books already, and I'm only 10% done with it. Adam Wiley, what's goody, boy? Listen, and I just got done with Ghosts of the Ozfront. Now, Ghosts of the Ozfront, I call it an audiobook, but it's Dan Carlin. I don't know if you follow hardcore history, but he puts out these podcasts kind of exposing segments of world history that we've either taken for granted or weren't taught about. And Ghost of the Ozfront is about World War II, and it's about the Blitzkrieg era in Germany, when they kind of designed this style of fighting of just going into a country lightning fast and just using an exhausting amount of resources really, really quick and defeating the enemy before they even have a chance to assemble themselves and even know that they're being attacked, right? That's what Ghost of the Ozfront is about. And he poses this question. It's could that have been you, right? And this is not to excuse anybody. This is not to excuse 20th century Germany or 20th century Russia. But there are stories, bro, of bakers. A guy who was a baker in Germany. He started as a baker, as someone who bakes bread and pies. And by the end of this war, he was taking pregnant Russian women and shooting them in the back of the head as a trained Nazi. Right? You have no idea where you're going to be a year from now. People who we assumed were regular people. There's a book called Ordinary Men. And which is an appropriate title. Look up that book. It's called Ordinary Men. And it's about how these ordinary, regular German citizens, regular Russian citizens who were writers and English teachers and mechanics, became these fierce people who were pawns in an evil scheme, right? It's not that they were evil people. It's that they were pawns in an evil scheme. There were these women, bro, in Ghost of the Ozfront. Check out Ghost of the Ozfront by Dan Carlin. There were these women that were called, the Nachthexen. Bro. So Stalin put out this decree that if you don't continue to march forward, because the Russians were terrified of this Blitzkrieg thing. So there was this proposal set up by Stalin. And he says, if you don't continue to march forward, if you retreat, then we're going to treat you like you are a traitor, right? So if you get taken captive by the German army, or if you retreat, we are going to treat you like you're a traitor, and we're going to kill your family. We're going to treat your family like the family of traitors, right? And so everyone had this idea, I cannot retreat. I can't fall into German hands, because POWs in Russia during the time of World War II were treated like traitors. You know what I'm saying? So your family is going to get killed if you're taken as a POW. Your family is going to get killed if you retreat, right? So women who have this deep maternal instinct, they be called what the Germans called the Nachthexen, which translate to the night witches. Bro, women were flying over Germans on the Russian front and bombing them in the middle of the night. Crazy, crazy stories, bro. And my question is, what would you do under circumstances like that? Do we all become evil? Or does the definition of evil change? Listen, what do you think? If you're here right now, if you're listening to me right now, Richard Stuckey, what up, boy? I'm not in Colorado no more. I'm out in Washington. I'm in the middle of this storm. It's not raining right now, so the breeze feels good with how hot it's been. But here's the question. And if you're listening to this right now, post your definition of evil. If somebody said, don't look it up in a dictionary, don't look it up on Google right now. Don't look it up on Google. Just type, if I were to ask you, if somebody just came up to you while you're sitting there at a coffee shop or you're sitting there at a bus stop and somebody said, hey, can I ask you something? What's your definition of evil? What would you say? DeMonte said, power to the people. We back to do maintenance. Ha, yeah, we gonna rock like crack when it came in. You know this work been hot as a Latin invasion for black entertainers. Hello. I'm glad you can make it. I could quote that whole verse, bro. Don't play with me, bro. What up, boy? Let's see, back to the question. If somebody asked you to give them the definition of evil, what would you say? Not the Google definition, not the dictionary definition. From your experience. From your experience. Go ahead and post it. What is your definition of evil? Listen, Ravi Zacharias, may he rest in peace. He is one of the philosophers and theologians who's had the biggest impression on my life. Adam Wiley, we got a definition. He said, my definition of evil, the will and want to do wrong and harm others physically, emotionally, and spiritually. My definition of evil, Adam Wiley says, the will and want to do evil, to do wrong and harm others physically. That's a utilitarian concept of evil, meaning evil as the worst possible misery for everybody, right? Utilitarian ethics are ethics that essentially say that to do right is to do things for the greater good of humanity, right? The degree to which you're helping humanity, you know, that's good. And the degree to which you're depriving humanity of well-being would be evil. So that's utilitarian ethics. I'm not mad at that. I think that there's some holes in utilitarianism. Lamar said, I've seen people do horrible things to other people. That's evil to me, the ability to do that. Facts. I think that's part of evil. That's part of evil. What if I were to say this? And this is not, I didn't make this up. What if I were to say evil is the violation of purpose? And some of you who've had deep conversations with me know that that's been my definition of evil since I've heard it used about 6 or 7 years ago. Evil is the violation of purpose. And the reason that's the best definition of evil for me is because both a Christian, well-renowned, and an atheist, well-renowned, and I'm talking about a nihilist. I'm talking about Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche. It's not Nietzsche, it's Nietzsche. But Friedrich Nietzsche agreed that evil is the violation of purpose, right? So since Nietzsche doesn't believe that there's purpose to the universe at all, Nietzsche says in his book, The Will to Power, that one of the great benefits of the Christian ethic is that words like good and evil have meaning, right? According to Nietzsche, according to nihilism, words like good and evil don't exist, right? Nietzsche said, insofar as we believe in a moral law, we pass sentence on existence. That was Nietzsche's critique of atheism in Europe. Nietzsche was saying, if you claim to be an atheist, you cannot believe in moral law. You cannot believe in right and wrong because you're acting like the universe should be different than it is. You're acting like the universe shouldn't be exactly the way it is. It's a question that I ask people. Check this out. It's going to bug your mind out. You can ask somebody, and I've asked this to people before. When I sit down, like a bunch of my friends back in Colorado Springs were atheists. We had talks all the time. We had dialogue. And I said, listen, how many times in history should an innocent person be murdered? I didn't say how many times does it happen. I said how many times should it happen? How many times per year should an innocent person be murdered? They'll think about it and they'll say, 0. An innocent person should never be murdered. I say, okay, new question. How many times a year should an innocent person be locked up in prison? They say never. That should never happen. Then you can ask them this question. You say, okay, here's final question. How many times per year should a rape happen? They'll say, oh no, that should never happen, right? When you're saying that these things that happen all the time in the world should never happen, Nietzsche says you're passing sentence on existence. You're pretending like there's rules to the universe. Where did you get those rules from? Right? There's utilitarian ethics, there's Aristotelian virtue ethics, there's Kantian deontology. We have all these philosophers with different, different modes of getting to this utopia that we all feel is there. We have all these different methods of arriving at this kind of super earth. It's just crazy to me how susceptible we all are. We think we're so far removed from it. Like, we read stories about Nazis. We read stories about Mussolini and about Stalin, and we think we're so far away from that. We think, oh, that could never be me. Those people were bugging. Those people were brainwashed. Bro, do you know that Hitler was called the voice of the collective unconscious? Hitler was called by Carl Jung. Carl Jung, the psychologist and philosopher Carl Jung. He said Hitler was the voice of the collective unconscious. What does that mean? That means Hitler didn't show up with a brand new idea. Hitler was not altogether revolutionary in his thinking. Hitler was the voice of a collective unconscious. They were already pissed off. They had already signed that punitive peace deal that were causing Germans to struggle, paying all their money to reparations for World War I. They were pissed off. They weren't even allowed to start their own army. Everybody had their foot on the German neck, right? If you watch Hitler's speeches, listen, if you watch his speeches, something creepy that you will notice is that whenever he gets applause, he starts to kind of go down that line. It's like, okay, yeah, you guys are responding well to that. I'm getting some applause from what I'm saying now, so I'm going to continue down this line. And then he'll throw out some wacky, kooky idea, and nobody applauds, so he moves on to the next thing that got him the applause. Hitler was responding to the concepts in Germany that was already there. They were ready for somebody like him. They already felt backed into a corner, right? Evil is a word we throw around so often as if that couldn't possibly be us. You got to understand, the Germans were psyched out when they arrived at Russia and they found out that women were fighting in the Russian army. That blew their minds. They're like, women? Why do you have your women out here, right? Why do you have your women out here fighting? And, why have you weaponized your entire population? It's so trippy to think that anybody, people who were bakers, people who sewed things, people who made shoes, people who made watches, by the end of this conflict were doing things that you couldn't imagine. I mean, we do crazy things for way less. Like, imagine we were under a dictatorship and the dictator said, either you march toward the German army or we're going to kill your whole family, right? What would you do? That's the only whack part about living out here. Every couple of seconds, there's a plane that goes by. It's just something I'm thinking about. Look, buy this book, A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Let's talk about it. Let's keep talking about when a large group of people were backed into a corner. You remember I was talking about Candace Owens? I was talking about how Candace Owens said that when that the Native Americans were savages and they were cannibals before the white man got here and Christianized them. I talked about how dumb that was. Bro, this book has taught me how dumb that idea really is, bro. Do you know that the Irish were cannibalizing people on the boat on their way from Belfast? There was a boat called the Seaflower that left Belfast. It was about an 18-week trip to the Americas, and they only packed enough food for 12 weeks. They had to throw 30 starved children overboard into the water. They ate 6 people. This is not funny. This is not funny. I'm just talking about, like, can you call somebody evil for that? For being backed into a corner and feeling like, yo, like, all I have left is my survival instincts. All I have left is my survival instincts. In Jamestown, Virginia, in 1710, there was a starvation event where people started digging up corpses. What was that? Hold up. I'm gonna try to get y'all. I'm gonna try to show y'all some wildlife right now. All right, no, it's no wildlife out here. I thought it was a porcupine. Porcupines get terrified during the storms. But in 1710, in Jamestown, Virginia, there was a starvation level event. You got to remember, when the population came over to the Americas, they didn't know how to farm, right? They had murdered tons of Native Americans that were trying to teach them. They didn't know what to do, and they were starving. So they would dig up graves and they would eat off of the corpses, off of human corpses, right? Which just kind of further digs in my points that Candace Owens has no idea what she's talking about, but off of her. The question is, does the definition of evil change when you're backed into that type of a corner? Do we have to see things through a different lens? Is the definition of evil as static as we think it is? Do things become acceptable all of a sudden? You know? Because I've always ran with the philosophy that the truth is objective. There's objective and subjective truth, right? A subjective truth is like ketchup or mustard is delicious, right? Somebody can disagree. Somebody can say, yo, mustard is gross because it's subjective. It depends on your opinion. But an objective truth is something you cannot deny, right? The earth is round. Should be an objective truth, right? Something that you shouldn't deny. It is the way it is, regardless of your opinion. So my question is, does the definition of evil change based on the circumstance, right? If we have starvation level events in Jamestown, Virginia, and starvation level events on the boats that are traveling to the US, right? Then does that justify the new take on evil that arrives as a result of that hardship? That's crazy. Because when we're not backed into a corner, when everything is Gucci, when everything is good, then the bar gets raised, right? When everything is prosperous, we're like, oh yeah, like any small infraction is evil. James Medina says no. Shout out to James Medina. Yo, James, I want to do a live with you sometime, my dude. Like, James, this is James Medina. This dude is one of the smartest apologists that I know. He's a pastor over at Breathe Worship Center. Known this dude for over a decade. Probably maybe a little bit closer to 2 decades. Yeah, definitely closer to two decades. I've known the dude since 2001. James, why would you say no? Now that you're in the chat, why would you say that the definition of evil doesn't change according to whether you're backed into a corner or not? Like, if I were to dig up a corpse right now, like if there's cemeteries around here, if I were to go to a cemetery and dig up a body and start eating off the corpse, people would say, oh, he's evil, he's deranged, like lock that guy up. But in Jamestown, Virginia, when they were starving, when all of the Native American tribes were just in the woods, like prospering off of their crops and just watching the white man starve, digging up corpses and eating them became a thing. It became like, so was that evil? Right? I feel like, yo, they were backed into that corner. Like, what do? Die? Do you die over the fact that that's a sacred thing? You say, oh, that's a sacred thing. I'm not going to eat this corpse, even though it's going to save my life. And what about the sea flower? The sea flower in the 1700s coming from Belfast, Ireland, right? There was starvation. They still had 3 weeks left in their journey to the United States, and there was no food. 30 children had already died of starvation and got thrown overboard. What are the rest of the passengers supposed to do? What if they're like, yo, instead of throwing the kids overboard, they're already dead. Let's eat some of them. This is trippy stuff. And I'm not saying, look, I'm not talking about, listen, I'm not saying I want to go cannibalistic. Don't look at me. Don't at me. Okay. I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean? I'm not going crazy here. I'm talking as a philosopher. As a philosopher, James says circumstances don't change objective truth. One could argue Jesus was backed into a corner. See, that's what I'm talking about, bro. James be preaching, bro. Talk about it. He said, but he fully complied with evil. No, he fully complied with evil. I don't know. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if complied is the word that you're looking for. Lamar said, but what? DeMonte said, so evil is subjective. Here's the thing, man. Evil, if we're going with the definition of evil being the violation of purpose, then it has to be subjective. Because who puts purpose in this universe? That's deep. Does the universe have purpose or not? And if the universe has purpose, then the creator of the universe decides what a violation is. Think about it, right? If I have, look, check this out. This is my keys, right? Does this key have a purpose? Does this key have a purpose? Yes, the purpose of this key is to start the engine of my car, right? If I take this key and instead of trying to start my car, like if I go and I like stick it in a socket, an electrical socket, I have violated the purpose of the key. I've abused it. I've abused this object. That's the definition of abuse too, the violation of purpose. But if things don't have a purpose, then abuse doesn't exist. Because abuse means to use it wrong, to do something you ought not have done. DeMonte says the person observing the universe puts purpose on it. Bro, these are facts. To me, bro, I say absolutely. There's no way that I can think my way out of that. I think what you just said is profound, bro. The person observing the universe puts purpose on it. The creator of the universe gives purpose to it. It's the reason it's okay to kick a soccer ball and not okay to kick a child. You know what I'm saying? The soccer ball has been built, designed with the purpose to be kicked. Feel me? He says, and you know I never agreed with the definition of evil. Okay, well, yeah, that's Ravi, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? I got that definition of evil from Ravi Zacharias. You know, may he rest in peace. But I thought that was the best definition of evil I've ever heard. The violation of purpose. I've never heard a definition of evil that good. You know what I mean? It spans everything. You know? But that's the question, man. Like that's all that I'm kind of meditating on right now. There have been instances in history where giant groups of people have been backed into a corner. Germany in the 20th century was backed into a corner. The Jamestown Virginians in the 1700s were backed into a corner. Spain, before Columbus left to reach the islands, the Bahamas, they were backed into a corner. Poor, backwards, right? Made their wealth off the backs of slaves and dead Tainos. the Taino genocide, backed into a corner. And the question becomes, does the fact that you're backed into a corner give you a pass on the evil that you do as a result of that? Think about this. Let's say 10 years down the line, they create something that makes it like so we don't have to kill animals anymore. Say that they make like a perfect meat substitute that gives you all the nutrition, all the protein that you get from meat, all the vitamins that you get from meat. Say that they create a perfect substitute for that 10 years in the future, and they mass produce it so they end world poverty, right? And then they look back at us and say, you know, they used to actually kill animals. You know, they actually used to shoot animals and bag them up and wrap them in plastic and sell them at grocery stores. Those people are evil, but they were backed into the corner of not having what we have today, that we can mass produce this fake meat. Like, think about it. It's crazy. Lamar said, can animals do evil? The reason I say that animals cannot do evil is because I base my definition of evil off of the is-ought distinction. There's a distinction between what you are doing and what you ought to be doing. And I don't think with animals that distinction exists. Animals, there's only what I am doing. Animals have no consideration of what I ought to be doing. Now, when you get to some smarter animals, like when you get to some like bonobos and chimps and apes, you know, and maybe even smarter animals like octopus and dolphins, I don't even know how smart they are. But when you get to some of the more intelligent animals that can think about, yo, I did this and maybe I shouldn't have done that. Like maybe I shouldn't do this. I don't know how their brains operate. But with evil, the definition, like evil requires an ought. That's the reason the term necessary evil is bogus. Whenever anybody says, oh, look, it was a necessary evil. Slavery was a necessary evil. That's garbage out the gate. Either it was necessary or it was evil. But the term necessary evil does not exist. That's a contradiction in terms. Because the term evil implies that it's unnecessary. Evil means ought not. That's the is-ought distinction in philosophy. You can't say that an evil is necessary. Because if it's necessary, it couldn't have been avoided. Right? So I don't think animals can do evil because there is no ought in the animal mind. They're not deep enough to contemplate what should have been done morally. Like animals are morally neutral. James said, I like the ought factor. It considers intent, for sure, right? It considers purpose. I'm telling you, think about that, right? It considers purpose, right? If I said I did it on purpose, that means I did it with intent. So if we say the universe has purpose and the evil is the violation of purpose, that means you're doing something that the mind that created the universe didn't intend. Intention, like James Medina just said, intention is synonymous with purpose. If you did it on purpose, you did it intentionally, right? So when we say, what is the purpose to the universe? You're saying, what did whoever made the universe, this mind, this unembodied mind that's responsible for matter and energy, what did he intend to do with this universe? Am I in violation of his intention, right? If I go and I murder this guy, have I violated the intention? There's no such thing as good or evil without considering intention. That's why the God idea becomes so massive. You can't just do away with it. You can't just put it away. Intention is there. Bro, I'm telling you, some of y'all need to friend James Rolla Medina. That's one of, like, I'm telling you, we've had some in-depth conversations. I miss that dude. One of the dudes I really miss in Colorado. Miss my man Rick. Miss my man Mike Anderson. Check it out. No rain. A storm is a brewing. Now I'm gonna get off here. Just wanted y'all to consider that. And here's the thing to consider. I'm gonna get off and I'm gonna leave you with this one thing. With this one question. James has already answered it. I think Lamar has already answered it. A couple people already answered it. The question is, does the definition of evil change when you are backed into a corner? Does the definition of evil change when you are backed into a corner, or when a large group of people are backed into a corner? And Lamar just said, that's not evidence of God, that's evidence of an intelligent creator. But the intelligent creator, like if we're talking about a mind, my definition of God is an unembodied mind from which all matter and energy is derivative, right? Then after that, you go into whether that God is more like Allah or Yahweh or Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama's idea of what the God concept is like, or Brahman, right? Or Krishna, right? Those are all branches. But what I'm talking about is the trunk of the tree, the unembodied mind from which all matter and energy is derivative, right? And the possibility of good and evil is evidence for that mind because of the word purpose. Because purpose means intent. I did it on purpose. You need mind for intent. Show me an example of something done intentionally without mind. I can't think of one. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I cannot think of one. Right? So if you believe in evil, that's the reason that it bugs me out when people say, oh, if there's so much evil in the world, how can God exist? How can God really exist if there's so much evil in the world? I'm like, yo, are you listening to the words you're using? Are you listening to the words you're using? Right? If you say, oh, how could there be a God? There's so much evil. What you're saying is, how can there be a being who put purpose in the universe when the purpose is so often violated? Bro, you're preaching to yourself. If you say, how can there be God when there's so much evil? You're saying, I'm noticing that purpose is being violated. So why is the creator of that purpose allowing the violations? Right? The brilliance of Friedrich Nietzsche is that he was noticing, yo, all of you guys are calling yourselves atheists, but you still walk around talking about good and evil. You're still using those purposeful terms. You're still blaming the problems in this universe on some mind. If you were truly an atheist, you would look around and say, yeah, this is exactly how an accidental universe should look. You prove that God exists when you're mad about it. You prove that God exists when your spirit takes issue with it. You're preaching to yourself.